So let's start, Debbie and Ed, with what was the impetus for the reboot? And I know that it's not a remake of the original, that it's a new adaptation of the existing books. But where did this story start for you?
Well, for me, I'd never seen the 70s version, and I wasn't even aware of the books, really. And it was Karen Thrussell from Mammoth who sent me 2 books, just as I was about to go on holiday, saying, would you consider adapting these? And I didn't know them, and I think if I had heard of them at all, I was thinking they'd be just kind of a bit slushy historical novels, and I thought, well, that'll be great to read on a beach. Yes. So I took them away, and I think I'd read about sort of 3 pages before I thought, wow, this is really good writing. These characters just kind of spring off the page. The storytelling is it's spellbinding. It just keeps you wanting to turn the page. And so I came back having read the 2 novels, and I went out for lunch with Karen and Damien from Mammoth Screen, and they were sort of doing a big number of, you've really got to do this. And I let them go on for about 10 minutes. I've been going, you really, really want me to do this? And I was going,
make them wait.
I did, and then I just went, yeah, I really want to do it, actually. so that's how I first came to them.
So this was a big departure for you, Debbie, wasn't it? Because it's the first time you'd ever tackled
I thought they'd actually made a mistake. I was just thinking, why on earth are they asking me to do an adaptation? Everything else I've ever done is contemporary. I think the most historical piece I've ever done was set in the 60s. Yeah. And I actually didn't think I would be able to do it. I was thinking, how do I work with somebody else's characters, particularly when they're so wonderfully drawn? How do I put words into the mouths of characters that are not mine? And it was really extraordinary, because I remember the moment where I had to come to write the first line of dialogue, because obviously it's all very carefully plotted out and what happens in each scene, but obviously there comes the moment where you have to write actual dialogue that's not in the book, because obviously a lot of the dialogue from the book is used, but there's some that I have to make up. And I was thinking, I'll never be able to do this, and suddenly it all seemed to happen. And now I've got to the stage where, with no disrespect at all, because I think it's the process that you have to go through if you're adapting something, they feel like as much my characters as they are Winston Graham's characters. But I think it's easy because they're so beautifully drawn and they are so wonderfully articulated by their dialogue that I kind of I had such a great starting point, and I've now got to the stage where it almost feels like they belong to me, and I have to feel that, because otherwise I couldn't it wouldn't be, I couldn't do the process if they didn't feel like mine.
When you were starting with your script, did you predominantly just use the books, or did you reference the 70s?
No, I didn't.
Watch it at all?
I didn't see it at all, and I thought it would be sensible not to watch it, because I didn't want to be influenced in any way. And I'd written 5 scripts before. I thought, well, I'll just take a look and see if there's,
What was that like?
Well, it was really, really interesting, actually. First of all, because I could see exactly why everybody had loved it in the 70s, because the stories are just tremendous. The characters they also just kind of come to life on the screen. There's some fantastic performances, so I could see why it had been such a huge hit. But I was also interested in some of the choices that had been made, because they had diverged from the books quite considerably in some areas. So it was just interesting to see what choices they made and the kind of choices I had made.
Was there anything that sort of made you go, oh, what did they do that for?
Yes, but I don't want to spoil it for people, because that's not in this first episode.
Yeah. So this first series, Let's Be Hopeful, is based on the first 2 books.
Yes,
isn't it? And how faithful have you been to the original text?
Obviously, because there's a huge amount of material there and masses of characters, and then sadly we don't have a Hollywood movie budget. Yeah. So I've had to obviously I had to make decisions about which storylines to follow, and obviously Ross is at the heart of the story, and therefore Demelza and Elizabeth, that triangle is there at the heart of the story. So some of the kind of smaller story strands that aren't directly impacted by Ross, I've actually had to take those out because we simply haven't got the space.
Yeah.
You know, when we first were commissioned to do this, it was only going to be 6 episodes, and I thought there's absolutely no way we can tell this story in 6 episodes. We were asked for another 2. I could actually have wish I'd asked for 12, to be honest, because then we could have told some of those other stories.
Well, hopefully you can.
Oh yes, but even within the first 2 books, I would have liked to have had more. But you know, I
have to say, it's quite amazing to be able to go back and say, can we have another 2 episodes?
Oh no, it was fantastic to be able to do that.
Yes, you can.
Yeah, it was great.
So did you do heaps of research outside of the books?
I did quite a lot of research actually. I did. I read all about, well, various things. History of Cornwall, history of the industries, mining industries, pilchards.
Pilchards are vital.
Yes.
I'm hoping there's going to be an entire episode devoted to pilchards.
Lots of pilchards. I mean, a lot of background. We have a historical advisor as well, who is fantastic. But a lot of background about what would be expected of people in various different classes in that era. My degree is in English literature, so actually I was very familiar with the literature of the 18th century.
Yes.
And I did quite a lot of background. We all did. You did a load of mining research, didn't you? Actually.
I'm sure you all want to hear about that.
Did you two do research as well?
I read some books on mining in Cornwall. Yeah.
Like team
riveting
research,
stuff.
so, yeah.
It really is. What about you? What did you research?
Yeah, I read the books, and I worked really closely with the historian, and we just plotted through exactly what de Melza wouldn't do that everyone else would.
See, when we should have been researching, we were horse riding up in York.
Yeah, that's true. You did a lot of that. Yes.
The riding is very good, actually. Did you? I mean, obviously,
Body double all the time,
You did
every
loads
shot.
in The Hobbit, didn't you?
Yeah, I've done some in the past. But we had we had a couple of weeks, didn't we, in up in Yorkshire.
A lot of it is you, though.
Yeah, a lot of it is. All of it is.
But you
Not the bits where you're right next to the cliff.
Up, Debbie.
So I was going to say, every time I saw you riding
it's
the
not
cliff
true.
edge, I was literally going, oh, health and safety.
Yeah.
There's a few shots, but yeah, obviously, Ross is pretty adept on a horse, so I had to become pretty good on it.
Was
But
it
it's
uncomfy when you were both had to be
awful.
on?
If you're at the back, you're finished. If you're a lad, done for.
Like being done up the wrong one by a cannon.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, horrid.
Yeah, it's not comfortable,
Horrid.
but very romantic to watch.
So, given that when you do adaptations of much loved iconic books, there's always that danger, isn't there, when you change anything significantly, because it makes people furious.
But I suppose
it makes some people furious.
Yeah, but if you're going to be worried about, because obviously you're never going to please everybody. I mean, even if I write something original, it's never going to please anybody. And when it's a much loved book, obviously everybody has their own particular view of it. I mean, I remember reading Margaret Mitchell's Gone with the Wind and having a really specific image of what Scarlett O'Hara looked like, and then being slightly disappointed that she didn't match up as far as I was concerned. And in a way, I think people will have the same, they will have, the fans of the books will have very specific images in their heads of the key characters, and nothing will match up to those. And we accept that. And also there'll be people who don't know the books and for whom this is a whole new, they've never heard of the 70s adaptation, they've never heard of the books, so they're coming to it completely fresh. I mean, I would love to think that we would make people go back to the books, actually, having seen it, because the books are wonderful. Yeah. So I think in many ways we are starting with a clean slate.
It's a clean slate.
Yeah.
So Aidan.
Yeah.
Now, Ross Poldark, he's sort of a little bit Heathcliff. He's a little bit Darcy. He's a little bit Cash in the Attic.
Yes.
So where did you start? Where was your starting point when you were considering, right, how am I going to play him?
Where was my starting point? My starting point was kind of the end point and the same point all the time. I just kept going back to the books and to the script, I mean, you can find inspiration from different places and different sources, and they're all really useful and it's enjoyable. I mean, I had a couple of months before I started shooting, probably even about 3 months before we started shooting, to research and to discover this character and find this character and to rehearse and do all sorts of different things. But it just keeps coming back to the script every time. You know, we were...
Actually, that's an interesting point. Is your Ross and is your Demelza, is it the scripts Ross and Demelza, or is it the books Ross and Demelza?
I don't know if there's a massive
combination of
divide
the two?
for me with that one. I mean, my reference most of the time would be Debbie's scripts, but of course the book comes into play. And I was reading the books as I was reading the scripts from the beginning. I think when the offer came in for me to play the role, I think I got like 6 of Debbie's scripts in the 2 books in the same day, and the offer and everything.
Read it in a day.
Bloody hell. And then I Googled, I was like, what the hell's Poldark? And I Googled it. Oh dear. I called my mum, she's like, you better not mess this up, Robin, that was so brilliant. But that was it for me every time, and the more I'd research and think about him and find out about him, and I'd read scenes with friends and different things, and then I was always coming back to the script, and especially the early episodes, just to find his voice, and through that his physicality and different things. So I don't know, it's hard to divide. I mean, those kind of like 12 weeks or 10 weeks for me are kind of strange. I was kind of all over the place.
Yeah. When you talk about his physicality,
Yeah.
did you just
Push-ups, press-ups and crunches,
turn
yeah.
up- did you just did you sort of sometimes just think, oh, do you know what? I'll just stand and look gorgeous. That'll do.
Oh dear.
That'll do.
Yeah.
Now I'm asking you this because I know that I was told a story about Daniel Craig once,
Oh yeah.
which I'll tell you after I've asked you this question. But
Okay.
did you at any point practice in the mirror your Poldark pout?
I gotta swallow this first. That would have went everywhere. The Poldark pout. I'm pouting quite a bit. I just realised it's the first time in a while since I've
There's a
seen the
lot
first
of
episode.
eyebrows
I
going
think that's
on. It's like,
naturally
go
what
on,
I
do
do.
the
Look at the
face.
state of these
Do the
eyebrows.
Poldark
They're there for frowning. No, I genuinely don't think of those kind of things. I really don't. It just they seem to happen, and they give themselves their own life, like the hair and everything else.
Yeah, the hair was good.
The hair is
It was
great.
sort of channeling Alex
I
Zane
know.
a little bit.
Made a
Yeah,
big
it was
mistake
nice.
chopping it
I
off.
liked it. Yeah.
Like a samurai, I lost my powers.
The story about Daniel Craig is that apparently he practiced for hours doing the turn, with the gun when he was James Bonded up.
Oh.
So did you watch any of the original?
I didn't. No, and obviously that was a conscious decision. Because they're there, I think they're on YouTube and stuff. I mean, they're pretty accessible. Not that Mammoth wouldn't give me copies if I asked for them, but no, I just decided to kind of find them myself and see what that would come up with. I was afraid more so of sort of subconsciously or unconsciously emulating Robin's brilliant performance, and I was afraid of kind of not seeing the boundaries there and different things. And I just wanted to see what I could come up with myself, and I felt like I had enough material anyway. I mean, Winston has given us so much in the novels, and Debbie's adapted them so well. I just didn't feel the desire or the need or something to go anywhere else. If I did, I would have done, but I didn't feel like I needed it.
He makes an appearance, doesn't he, in 2 episodes?
Yes.
Yeah, Reverend Holtz.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's great. He's brilliant in it.
Yeah, it's
Well,
wonderful.
when we first got the go-ahead, he actually got in touch with Mammoth just to kind of say, this is fantastic, really wish you well. And we thought straight away, oh, I wonder if we could persuade
Bring him
him.
in.
And he's been so supportive all along. He's been absolutely brilliant. And of course, he is fantastic. He is great. Those scenes are amazing, aren't
They're
they?
fantastic.
Yeah.
They're great. They're great.
So what can we expect from your version of Poldark? What sort of man is he going to become?
Man, is he? I don't know. He's a contradiction of a lot of things. I think he's quite conflicted. I mean, in this first episode, I mean, it's a great place to start for a character. It's a dream for an actor, really. I mean, to start off in that position where the character comes back to town with, the place completely changed in his eyes. His dad has died while he's been away. The land that he's inherited is completely desolate, and the cottages he owns are falling apart, and people are leaving, people are starving. His family industry, the mines, are diminishing. But the one thing bringing him back was was Elizabeth was his beloved, this promise, this
bitch.
wish she
Yeah,
had.
what
But it's not her fault. Just don't say that. But then it's ruined. I mean,
Dead to me.
What a
dead to
fool.
me.
I think that's quite unfair. She thought he was dead.
I hope she gets typhoid.
I know you don't mean
Or
that.
dies from a bad pilchard.
But he's strong. I mean, I think many weaker men would have galloped to London. You know, there's nothing to hang around for, it seems. But I think Ross, I think he knows his roots are in Cornwall, and I think he believes that he's like inherently the only person who can really save save it. I mean, there's a lot of people dying and need work and are impoverished, and he's in a position to do something about it. And I think he feels that responsibility. So. It's one of the reasons why he sticks around. But he's not just this benevolent,
really,
saintly
isn't he?
character. He's also a bit of a rebel. And
It's a little bit of Russell Brand of his day.
Russell Brand.
Sort of.
The hair is similar.
Little bit. So Eleanor, let's talk about Demelza now. Sort of in terms of the characters who go on a journey, my goodness, you know, you've got sort of the biggest one to go on, haven't you, in this series?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what a part, you know. Boy, episode 1.
Yes.
Married with child, episode 5. You know,
Don't give it away.
Sorry. Yeah, amazing role. I've always said I'm repeating myself amazingly with this quote, but it's the Scarlett O'Hara of roles, and they just don't really come along for actresses, and I leapt on it when it.
But she's
when
the
it
emotional
came round.
heart of the show, isn't she? There's sort of something of the Eliza Doolittle about her progression, isn't there?
Definitely, I think. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that.
Did you feel any sort of weight of expectation playing her, given that she's such an iconic character?
Yeah, massively. When I first heard they were making it, I sort of may have spoken to my parents, and they went, "Oh my God, wow!" But I didn't want to watch the original series too much, but at the same time, you'd be stupid to ignore Angharad Reese's performance and how she managed to capture the heart of the public in the way that she did. And so I watched bits of it in order to try and capture that with my own portrayal of Demelza. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of pressure. You know, it was a tremendously successful previous adaptation, and I'm really nervous about it coming out.
We're all nervous.
You're absolutely wonderful in it.
Oh,
absolutely
thank
wonderful. And I heard that you pulled out all the stops to get the part when
Yeah.
you auditioned.
Yeah, I wore my brother's clothes. Yeah, originally.
I was there, I don't remember that.
Yeah, you were there, yeah.
Bloody
And
hell.
I hadn't got a clue. I hadn't got a clue who you were either, so I was
That's
Well.
the best way to do it.
Wipe out of series 2, please.
But yeah, no, I did. Originally, I was asked to audition for Elizabeth, and I felt that I read the scripts, and I was like, I really like Demelza. She's amazing. Please, can I audition? And so I kind of begged the casting director, and eventually she went, fine, yes, okay. And so in I came, in Ross,
In your
my
brother's
brother's clothes. And
What specifically did you wear?
I wore his Christmas present, which was a very kind
What, a
of...
Christmas jumper?
No, well, it was a jumper, and it was this kind of very baggy jumper, and I remember him being so pissed off that he wasn't allowed to wear his own Christmas present, and that I was going to an audition in it. But yeah, and I wore kind of army boots and just refused to speak to anyone for the entire audition, and kind of kept this gormless expression on my face. But yeah, it was. I've never really done that before either. I don't know what came over me.
It must
It
have
worked,
worked.
yeah,
That
yeah,
was
yes,
for
yeah.
you, yes.
I mean, at the moment I saw that jumper, really. Seriously. No, it was a wonderful moment. You know, we'd sort of, I think this sort of endless sort of procession of emails and phone calls and messages from Susie Paris, our wonderful casting director, that she had sort of heaped on her from Eleanor, and so kind of it sort of I guess it kind of flagged up Eleanor's enthusiasm for the part, and she really did come in I get told I look like a tramp, but she came into the room and it was an extraordinarily large jumper. I do remember that. But what really came out of it was she walked into the room and she was Demelza.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, it was just a real joyous experience working with the two of them. Sorry, I'm getting all emotional now, but I mean, they are so giving, and fearless.
Yeah. So let's talk about what it looks like, because you've made it look incredible. It's incredibly cinematic, and part of that obviously will be down to Cornwall, which is very much a character in its own right in the show. But the first thing, well, not the first thing that struck me, but one of the things that I kept wondering about was obviously lots of actions happening on cliff edges. And what were the logistics of getting a film crew up coastal paths? Because I've walked the coastal path of Cornwall, and they're not easily accessible.
Well, you just asked nicely. No, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. Cornwall as a character in Poldark is so important, and that was going back to your first question, which I never finished answering. That was one of the things that really sort of excited me about it, because it's been a part of my life for as long as I can remember, and it's wild, it's unpredictable, it's beautiful, just like Aidan and Eleanor, and there's this sort of wonderful kind of energy and beauty to the landscapes that, as you say, you sort of put, you used exactly the right word. It's incredibly cinematic, and with having that kind of team, I guess, and that sort of backdrop, it was extraordinary. And we started off doing interiors, and then we went to do exteriors, and the whole project for me just absolutely sort of burst into life, and it was wonderful up to that point, and it just sort of stepped up a gear from then on. And in terms of sorry, what was the question? In terms of health and safety, no, I mean that's all fine. I mean, I think one of the sort of really striking things, it's not sort of hanging people off cliffs, although I will get to that. But I mean, it's Aidan, we did a day's filming at Nampara right, well before the start of the shoot, because we wanted to see Nampara in different seasons. So when he's dry stone walling, that's a winter scene. And the art department gave him sort of some bits of polystyrene, and he was saying, I don't want that, and he was sort of picking up all these great big rocks, and you're thinking in terms of health, safety, and the shoot all kind of proceeding nicely. And I was kind of standing there as he's hefting these great big bits of rock up, and I was scared as he chucked them on, and they're massive, great thuds. And you're thinking there's a 20-week shoot coming up, and he's going to have a hernia, Yeah. But so it's the little things, and then I think then right at the end, and Aidan, I think you saw the first shot when Aidan, day one, shot one, Aidan Tёrnер gallops towards Trent With at sort of breakneck speed, and yes. Aidan did say, is that a good way to start a shoot?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
And then of course right at the end, before we handed over to Will McGregor and his wonderful team for the second half of the series. There's, obviously, it's not the end of the relationship between the two of them. They do get to know each other quite well. It's not too much of a spoiler. And there's this scene in episode 2 where Demelza Ross comes back from a night on the town, and he's naked in the sea, and she's leaning over a cliff top. And it's at moments like that when you're just about to sort of hand the whole project over to someone else, and you're thinking, so he's naked in the sea, she's hanging off a cliff top, is this good? But it's a beautiful scene.
Yeah.
It is a beautiful scene, but the thing is, when I had written it, I was imagining that it was going to be rough Cornish weather, the sea,
or shallow water at the very least.
No, I was actually thinking that it would be, cold, a grey morning, yes. And the waves would be kind of, splashing in his face, and it ends up looking like a Greek island. That was the problem. It was flat calm that day, wasn't it? It was. You having to sort of splash water on yourself.
But actually, when you're doing a period drama, as the director, is your first inclination to always be absolutely 100% true to the period, or are you looking at ways to sort of make it relevant for a modern audience? Is that something you think about?
Yeah, I think in terms of a style and approach, I think that, you know, that's informed, you know, first of all, everything's informed by the story, and that's your starting point. And then, you take it from there, really. And I think, first of all, you know, when I first read the scripts, the first thing I thought was, you know, there's this distant war in a foreign land. This guy comes back from it. There's this sort of unrest at home. You know, Winston Graham chose a very, very specific point in time to set the story, which is, you know, key to the what's going on. And also you've got the rise of the sort of banks, and, you know, through the character of George Warlegan, wonderfully played by Jack Farthing. So you've got this kind of, you know, contemporary resonance which is there in the scripts, and I think it's just a case of taking that forward. And you know, and I think, as you saw from the trail at the end, and also through episode 1, there's so much energy, there's so much life that Aidan and Eleanor and the rest of the cast bring to it, that it's really a case of it's a case of representing that, and I think and also there's something about Cornwall, there's something about the Poldark novels, there's something about Debbie's scripts that just says no formality, please.